Hey everyone, welcome to another video in our metal shaping series. I am Chris Runge and this is the RS. If you guys haven't caught up on the previous videos, we have been basically shaping out the entire skin to this buck and a lot has been covered so far. Since our last video, I was able to get the driver's side of the car roughed out and now I'm ready to focus in on the tail section. So as I plan my approach to shaping out this rear end, I have to look at a couple of things. This is a pretty large amount of metal to shape in one shot. So that means I have to cut it up into a few sections. And this is kind of a critical decision because you have to decide where you're going to put your seams. I didn't really get into this specific information when I did the fenders, but we'll touch on this now. When you put a seam in a panel, I like to put it at a high crown point where there's a lot of shape because it's easier to file out, to sand out, and to make it disappear. Well, I don't have a lot of high crown shape up in this deck lid section, so I'm going to have to really nail my weld down and make it as clean and as tight as possible where I have a little bit more forgiveness in these areas. So the way I'm going to break this up is in three pieces. Top piece here, the upper tail section, and then the lower tail section. It's obvious to me that the best place to put a weld for the tail is going to be right along this seam because I can bring the two together, easy to finish it there, and it'll work nicely. But as I get up into here, the panel loses a lot of its crown and flattens out, and that's going to be really difficult to blend that weld and make it as invisible as possible. I think the best place for this next weld is going to be right up in this section. I have a little bit of crown to work with, and I can shape this out in one piece fairly easily. So that's kind of how I decide where I'm going to put my welds. So I've got my paper laid out to use for the template. As I mentioned, I'm going to have my seam up in this area, and then I'm just basically going to use the buck for guide to lay out where I'm cutting the bottom. I can even just mark half of this, fold the paper in half, and cut it all in one shot. So now that I have the general shape defined, I have to decide which way I want to start bending this thing. As with my other shaping that I've done in the videos, I'm going to kind of split the difference. So I'm both going to hit it with the bossing mallet throughout the middle, and I'm going to shrink the outside. So I've given it a bit of crown through here. I need to shrink down this corner and this corner to draw those in and wrap them around the tail. And I'm just going to ease into this very slowly because it can be deceiving how much work needs to be done, and you can get too far ahead of yourself, and then in some cases you have to toss the panel. This tells me a lot of what needs to happen. I'm going to need to come in now and shrink from this end to draw that down, and then I'm going to wheel this and open it back up, and then this is all going to get wheeled up here to give the rest of that crown. So after a series of trips back and forth to the shrinker and the stand for hammering, I have a pretty good fitment of the panel now, and it's time to do some wheeling to really kind of smooth this out and get an idea of just how close and how accurate it is. So I'm starting this process just by really smoothing out all the lumps from hammering, and then working into the shrunk areas. And I'm going to break this up into a couple of sections, really. I'm going to use a specific die in this area that accommodates this radius, and then I'm going to get into wheeling this in a different direction with a different die. Switched out to a flatter lower anvil here because the last thing I want to do is put too much crown in this area as it comes across the back here. So we'll just start out by lightly knocking down these shrinking marks. See if we can get this to flow nicely. I'm still a little bit skeptical as to whether we're going to be able to keep this upper section, but hopefully it'll work. So that's just a general pass to smooth this out. And now we're going to try to actually get some shape put into it. And I'm just kind of easing my way through just to make sure it's not going to really shoulder up and cause problems. Looks like it's going to be okay now. So I'll do full passes and tighten up my anvil just a little bit. The whole idea here is to cover as much ground as we can on that buck, but also to land the edge of this panel in such a way that it is favorable for welding. And right now, this edge is not very favorable at all to have my seam to weld on. Okay, so I want to raise this through here. Just around the area that I shrunk. I want to lift this, get it to blend. I'm going to do the same over here. Well, you know, in my early videos, I talked about learning to shape metal and it kind of starting out as a wrestling match. And as you learn the material and how it moves, it turns into a dance. Well, this panel definitely brought in a little bit more of the wrestling match factor. But all in all, I was able to save it. At one point, I thought I was going to have to toss it. And it's looking really, really promising. So the next section that I'll be working on will be the upper portion of the rear deck lid and the under portion, and getting all of these to blend. So there's still some fine tuning to do on this one, get everything flowing together beautifully, and then go ahead and weld it up. So thank you guys for following along with the build process on the RS. We do have the coupe version coming up, as well as some of our own personal projects. So if you haven't subscribed, please do so Hit the like button if you like what you're seeing, and leave a comment if you have something to say. We'll see you next time.